if you have a family history of cancer, much like I do, then you may think that that's your destiny. You may think that you're going to be stuck with that sooner or later down the road. But a new study sheds light that that may not be your destiny. I'm Dr. Jeff Cumrow, and over the past 15 years, I've had the blessing of helping thousands of people transform their health. And today, what I want to discuss is why this research is so important. And it's not just important for cancer. Yes, obviously it is discussing cancer, but there are other things that we should be aware about on this. So really, when we look at healthcare in general, a lot of the push right now is to identify the genetic aspects of things, right? So what do I mean by that? They're looking to pinpoint the exact genes that cause each disease process. And the reason for that is if you can find the genetic aspect of it, A, you can change it, but B, I mean, there's tons of money to be made on patents and things like that, right? So we're not really looking so much toward the things that we can fix with lifestyle changes. Now, the fact of the matter is most diseases are lifestyle diseases, right? What does that mean? It means the choices that we make every day lead us in that direction. And a new study shows that cancer has a large component to that. There is an epigenetic component to that. And when we look at genetics, we know what the genetics are, right? It's the genetic material is the basically underlying protein that drives life. And you know, it's a combination of your mother and your father and all your ancestors are brought into that. So if it is on the genes, then you are highly likely to have something. But epigenetics control the expression of those genes, right? So it's like a little light switch. If you flip the light switch on, you express that gene. If it's a good gene, it's going to minimize your risk of disease. If it's a bad gene, it's going to increase the likelihood of that disease. You know, BRAC, the breast cancer gene, is a great example of this. There are a lot of people that have that gene. Some of them have it turned off, some of them have it turned on. The second that it turns on is when you start to express that gene that has a greater likelihood for breast cancer, right? So just because somebody has a genetic marker does not mean they're going to have disease. And that's the important thing to remember here. And this is where a lot of things have driven us in this way. Now, it's important to clarify that this study shows that some cancers are epigenetically driven. Some are still genetically driven. You know, a great example of this would be skin cancer. You go out in the sun for too long, too long at the wrong periods of time. It's important to know that as well. But if you go out in the wrong type of light, it basically melts your DNA together. And that's ultimately a genetically driven thing. It alters your genetic sequence. When we look at the epigenetic things, it's the lifestyle that drives these, right? So what you eat on a daily basis, how much stress you're under, what type of sleep you get, how much water you drink, how much exercise you put in. Do you smoke? Do you drink? What type of things do you do on the daily basis? That's what drives the epigenetic expression. And there are multiple cancers it shows in here that are epigenetically related. What does that mean? It means you have power. Now, I'm going to tell you a quick story about my mom. Like I said, I have a very strong cancer history on one side of my family. And unfortunately, my mom fell victim to that. And she ended up with pancreatic cancer and didn't survive it. And what they were worried about is that there was a genetic component to it, and that my siblings and I would be higher likelihood of having pancreatic cancer or other types of cancer. So they paid for genetic testing on that. Unfortunately, they lost the test. They still got charged. They lost the test, and they didn't get the results. And that's something that bugged my mom up to the very end. Like the very last day even, she talked to me about it. And she's like, I really wish that I would have gotten that for you guys. And I looked her in the eyes and I said, Mom, it does not matter what came back on that. Because I'm going to live my life the way I'm going to live my life. I'm going to make the choices right now that I know can help us prevent those things later on, right? Maybe it matters to my siblings. I don't know. I didn't talk to them about that. But I'm going to live my life in a way that's going to minimize the likelihood of me coming up with that. Because I know that diet changes things. I know that supplementation changes things. I know hydration and stress reduction and all of these things play a role. I don't drink, I don't smoke, I don't do any of those things because I'm trying to increase the likelihood of avoiding those things. Much as I should, right? If I'm going to talk to other people about doing this, I don't think it's right for me to go and do those things. Personal choice. There are people out there that, they have the information and they still choose to do other things. That's their choice. That's something that is theirs. Congruency in my part, I'm not going to do that. Now, the fact of the matter is, it's not just some types of cancer that are epigenetically driven. Most disease processes are epigenetically driven. If we were to see a genetic change that led to a lot of things, there are plenty of examples of this. If we look at the ADHD epidemic, if we look at the autism epidemic, if we look at heart disease, diabetes, all of those different things, do they tend to run in families? Absolutely. Are they genetic? No. They're epigenetic in nature. It's the choices that, not only have we made, but our generations prior to us. There's epigenetic research out there that shows 7 to 13 generations are affected by the choices you're making today. Powerful, right? It means that you can change not only yourself, but you can set your family up for generational health. Not generational wealth, generational health by the choices that you make. But if these things were genetic, we would be seeing, a very slow progression of it in that direction. Because genetics take thousands of years to perpetuate throughout society, right? It's not something that just all of a sudden comes on. And with the speed, we know that it's epigenetic, and there's plenty of research to back this up. There's piles and piles of research that will back this up. The things that we're having are epigenetic in nature. You have more control than you think. You're being sold that you don't have control. You're being sold that if your grandparents had it, that if your parents had it, you're going to be stuck with it. And it is very, very true that these things tend to run in families, but it is not genetic, and you have control over things. So my challenge to you is take a look at what is in your family history. Is it heart disease? Is it diabetes? Is it, certain types of cancer? What runs in your family? Is it ADHD? Is it autism? What can you do to make changes? Because most of those things are epigenetic in nature. They are lifestyle diseases. And with that, the lifestyle that you live determines it determines your risk. It doesn't determine whether or not you're going to have it, because you don't really have a choice on that, right? But it minimizes the risk. The more of those positive light switches you can turn on, the better off you're going to be. The more of those negative ones you can turn off, the better off you're going to be. So the choices you make give you a lot of control. You don't have a choice. We don't know at this point which ones control which things. There are a lot of epigenetics, and that's going to be something that comes in the future. We don't know which controls which right now. We don't know how to make the decisions that are going to affect a certain epigenetic marker. But we will at some point. I have confidence that we will learn that. But right now, the best you can do is just make the choices to live the cleanest, best lifestyle that you possibly can. And if you do that, you actually give yourself a little bit of control over the likelihood of ending up with those things. So while a lot of cancers are still genetic and will run in families, depends on what type you have. But this does give you power. And that's the important thing, is when we have power, we can make the choices that are going to drive us in that direction. When we have power, we have confidence, right? Because the things that we're doing, we have knowledge, we have time, we have energy. And the sooner we start this, obviously, the better you go. But we have that ability to make that shift, not only in our mindset, but actually in what we're doing throughout. And that's going to change. And that's ultimately what society needs. That's something that I go back and forth on, how hard do I push on this. But we really have to start making this choice on our own, right? Each and every one of us has to make that decision of, is this the right fit for me? When is enough enough? When do I take control? When do I change myself? And when we decide to make that change, there's nothing that's going to be able to stop us. That's when we make things happen. That's when we make things move forward. That's really where success is going to lie. But it's going to take a concerted effort. Because the fact of the matter is, we're still in a state where we don't want to believe that the choices we make end up causing our diseases and things like that, right? It's hard information. And I struggle with this just like everybody else. I'm not telling you that you're, living a worse lifestyle or that you don't want to face it. I don't want to face it either. But the fact of the matter is, sooner or later, we have to face the fact that we have control. The choices that we make are going to affect our health. And whether that ends up being cancer or heart disease or Alzheimer's or diabetes or whatever it is, it doesn't matter what your family history is. You have more power than you think. That's the message I want you to understand out of this. So I love you guys. I appreciate you spending some time with me. I know that it is your most valuable resource, and I appreciate that. So have a great day. I'll catch you on the next video.